Okay, I was curious about Dorothy Day and Thomas Merton, why you chose them as representative, because I don't think they are at all, and I was raised Roman Catholic and went all the way through the school systems
Okay.
to include a convent high school. And
Well,
they were regarded as radicals. And
Oh, yeah.
The voice of the church that wanted to canonize Dorothy Day was regarded as real sickos.
yeah, she was considered to be a social radical. I think she would have called herself a social radical. Dorothy Day. Well, first answer.
I don't think that there is. I think what the thought was there was between her early writings and her later writings, it's just socialism in another guise. And do we want to really be known as the socialist church of the world?
Right. Yes, she definitely.
regardless of the fact that they are, but.
Right. Well, and when I put their names down, it's not that they're the voice of Roman Catholicism, because I don't think that's necessarily true. It's that I think, and there may be better examples, that they represent fairly the voice of Roman Catholic pacifism of this past century. Maybe the more radical pacifism, certainly for Dorothy Day. Thomas Merton, I think, was a little less radical, although he was radical.
Yeah, he was just weird.
Well, and it may be that they're not the best examples, but they were the best examples I could find for the Roman Catholic pacifists. Realize that this is the pacifist voice that we're talking about with them.
They were not a big voice.
Right. That could very well be the case. I do think. Are there any other pacifists that you can think of? Because I wasn't suggesting that they represent the church, but rather that they represent sort of the pacifist voice within the Roman Catholic Church.
Well, I wondered when I went through and I read their verse, I didn't even print out anything from either one of them because I just thought that they were, to me they were just people to be dismissed. I mean, they were just kind of like a blip, blip in history, but, a little bump in the road. I just don't think that they formed any. I mean, they may be the best examples of pacifism, and can I think of anybody else? No, because I never thought of the church as a pacifist church.
Well, I think your points are good. I would say that they appear to have had some sort of an influence on the Roman Catholic Church. Maybe not the reasons for their being pacifist, but certainly that voice, because this pacifist voice that began to be heard within Roman Catholicism at least made its way into Vatican II, in the sense that Vatican II said that pacifism does have a place in the in the Roman Catholic Church, and that continues to be the position of the Roman Catholic Church. It's a minority position, certainly, but it's allowed.
Do you think it's the populist position or the clerical position?
I don't know. What I do know is that if you're to talk about the Roman Catholic Church's view of war and peace, the standard line, and I don't mean that disrespectfully at all, I mean it's sort of the position of the Roman Catholic Church the default position is war is a bad thing, however, and this is going to sound a lot like Augustine and Aquinas because that's exactly where they got it. War is a bad thing, however, war is sometimes a necessary step to take in order to secure the common good, because we live in a sinful and fallen world. However, we do have hope because God created us with reason, with a certain sense of virtue, and with a desire for the common good. So there's a natural, just like with Aquinas, I think, when he asks, is war necessarily always evil? There's a natural proclivity against war, but a recognition that war is sometimes required to maintain society. Now I believe that's a more or less generalized view of the Roman Catholic position on war and peace. But within Roman Catholicism, there is an allowance, a pocket, you might say, and I wouldn't say a pocket of resistance, but a pocket of inclusion that allows for the pacifist voice. Now, there are several different reasons that people might choose to be pacifists, and I think that this is interesting. When you think about Dorothy Day and even Thomas Merton, they really go back to this idea that we are to take Jesus at his word. Now, just war thinkers believe that too, but what the pacifists mean when they say that is literally we are to obey the literal words of the Beatitudes without any differentiation between who our neighbors are. A just war thinker might say, well, sometimes I have a duty to defend my neighbor. This is what a lot of the just war thinkers of this age have said, and of all the past ages. Pacifists would say that's not for you to do. Your job is to live out the Gospels. And sometimes, I actually think it was Richard Niebuhr, who's not a Roman Catholic, but this is still a Roman Catholic thought. He wrote a book called The Grace of Doing Nothing. So a lot of these Roman Catholic pacifists and Protestants as well basically believe that we are called to be Christ's disciples, and that we may be called to suffer, we may be called to die in a war, but we are not called to fight in a war under any circumstance, and there is a grace in doing nothing. But now, again, when we're talking about Dorothy Day, particularly, yeah, she produced a magazine with some of her colleagues called The Catholic Worker. It was certainly it was socialist. It had very much of a socialist tint. And when I put these names down here, it just certainly doesn't mean that this is what I agree with or what I'm suggesting we should agree with. It's just that these people, while they were certainly rejected by many in the Roman Catholic Church as being out there, their voices still, I think, infiltrated Roman Catholic thought as we see the pacifism position being allowed by the Church now.
And to some extent, mainline Protestantism.
Right.
Probably more so with Merton and Day.
Right.
But definitely mainline Protestantism at Princeton, Yale, all the big mainline Protestant seminaries. He was definitely, at some point in the late 50s, early 60s, a real star among them.
Right. And the thing, too, and we can go straight to pacifism and just talk about it, because I do think that it's one of the more curious developments. Good morning.
Isn't he into
So what do you
mind
think?
me.
What do you think, Paul? Just like your thoughts.
I think you're right.
Thank you very much. We're talking about pacifism, and one thing that I saw in my readings on pacifism that continued to come up and come up and come up is this: just war thinkers. The just war doctrine is a rule-based doctrine. It is. I mean, if you have the criteria, and I don't think we actually have enough to go around, but if you've seen the criteria or have the criteria, you know that it is a rule-based doctrine. It starts with, and there are people who disagree with what I'm even about to say, but I believe it starts with the presumption that war is something we want to avoid. But then it carves out a number of exceptions to that general presumption that war is something we want to avoid. And namely, it creates the scenario in which war is not only permissible, but according to Augustine and Aquinas, sometimes morally obligatory. Okay, it is rule-based. Now, in the pacifist tradition, it's often not rule-based. It's what you might call ethics-based or lifestyle-based. Namely, what a lot of pacifists say that they're doing, and I think they are doing this, is they start well before the question of rules and whether or not war is ever okay. And they go straight to what they call the literal teaching of Christ and Christ's lifestyle of giving of himself, of literally turning the other cheek, and say that this is not a matter of whether or not it's right to go to war, it's not a matter of when it's okay to go to war. It's not for us to decide how this is all going to turn out because we're pacifists. We are called to we are called to live in what has already been realized eschatologically, and that is the kingdom of God come to earth. Okay, they're really big on this kingdom of God concept being present, and therefore the requirement to live it out. And in their minds, that requirement to live it out is a requirement of living a life of peace, nonviolence, non-resistance, regardless of the consequence. One thing Stanley Hauerwas says, if you happen to read any of his interviews or anything he's said, particularly since 9/11 or since Iraq, although he was also, he's been a voice of pacifism for a number of years, even the first Gulf War, he had major objections to he's a pacifist, obviously. But one of the things that he used to say, and it's very thought-provoking, I think, is this idea that we are not called necessarily to survive individually or collectively. Okay, and this is so counterintuitive. It's so different than what Aquinas would say when he talks about the building up of the common good and how we are called. But God endows us at the moment of our creation. God endowed us as human beings with this desire towards community, towards the common good.